In this video we are going to take a closer look at building our first Deathwatch list in 10th edition, making best use of the Black Spear Task Force detachment. In the first part, we will go through my main considerations when building a Deathwatch army list, attempting to capitalize on the strength of our new 10th edition rule set. In the second part, we will then go through the first iteration of the list itself, including potential variants that will hopefully provide some inspiration for you guys when building your own lists. Lastly, there will be a quick wrap-up of what has been covered.
Welcome to SwissHammer, your channel for modeling in Warhammer 40k. My name is Tammer and I will be guiding you through this video.
For the purposes of this video, I am going to assume that you guys are roughly familiar with the sum of our 10th edition rules, the Black Spear Task Force detachment, and the current points considerations when selecting our unique Deathwatch datasheets. For a more detailed coverage, feel free to check out my recent videos covering the Deathwatch 10th edition index, as well as the Monitorum Field Manual. The links are in the description. First of all, when building an army list in 10th edition, we now have far more liberties when compared to even the old Arks of Omen detachment of 9th edition. In a nutshell, we need to have at least one character unit, and we are still limited to the rule of 3 for the same datasheets, with the exception of battle line or dedicated transports, where we can have up to 6 of the same datasheet. For Deathwatch specifically, one big change here is that kill teams are not battle line, so contrary to 9th edition, where they were troops and as such did not fall under the rule of 3, they now do, which means we can pick a max of 3 for each of the kill teams. In contrast, our Deathwatch veterans are battle line, meaning that we can get up to 6 squads of them. This is particularly useful because they are a solid investment even at minimum unit size, and as such it's great to have the option to potentially fill up a list with multiple of these. But without getting ahead of myself, another important change are the fixed points for minimum and maximum unit size, including our kill teams, which makes it far easier to calculate the exact points, as war gear happens to be free as well. As such, for the time being, even a basic spreadsheet might just be enough to get the job done. As I am making this video, GW has also freshly released a new version of the Warhammer 40k app, which includes an army builder that is currently available for free, even though only for a limited amount of time. While the app itself works quite decently and can be considered a huge improvement over the previous version, it still lacks consistency checks, aka in many cases it will not warn about invalid war gear configurations. Therefore, if we have to do these validations by ourselves anyway, a spreadsheet might be all we need for the time being. With the basics to army building in 10th edition out of the way, here are some of my main considerations when approaching a new list. While we might get overly excited to try out all these new and old reworked datasheets, I think first and foremost the games are still won by playing the missions. Quite contrary to 9th edition, we can no longer combat squad, and as a result, our kill teams are currently best played as a 10-man brick. Combined with them not getting battle line and ending up with an OC value of 1, gone are the days when we would just fill a list with kill teams and more or less automatically end up with a solid way to play the objective game. As I already mentioned in my initial index review, I think the role of kill teams changed significantly, and while we still want to include some of them, I think Deathwatch lists are going to look quite different from the good old days of the kill team strike force in 9th edition. Instead of omnipotent kill teams, we now have strong army rules that can benefit a much broader range of datasheets, including powerful datasheets from the vanilla Space Marine Index. But nonetheless, the large majority of our powerful stratagems benefit either 2 kill teams at the same time, the emphasis here is on the kill team keyword, or a single non-kill team datasheet. I am specifically pointing this out because aside from our actual kill teams, our Deathwatch veterans also get this keyword and as such synergize just as much with all these stratagems. As a rule of thumb, I believe that the recommended minimum here is 2 kill teams, with the sweet spot most likely being 3 max size units with the kill team keyword, as this makes it more likely that we can double play a stratagem on 2 of them in a sensible way. Furthermore, while we're discussing stratagems, 3 out of 6 are special issue ammunition stratagems, aka favor ranged units, which I believe leans Deathwatch more towards shooting oriented lists, even though we can still deliver in close combat. And last but not least, the new old feature of attaching characters to units can potentially result in very powerful combos, but just like with Hero Hammer in previous editions, I think we need to find that sweet spot between force multipliers and having enough bodies to get the missions done, especially now with the 10-man kill team bricks as I initially mentioned. Speaking of attaching characters, seeing that we have very powerful stratagems at our disposal, I think it would be reasonable to also consider how to save or even gain additional CP over the course of the game. This can be anything from being able to play a single stratagem on 2 kill teams as previously mentioned, a captain allowing the unit to play a strat for free, or inquisitors giving access to CP regain. More on this a bit later. With these general recommendations out of the way, how did I go about building my first iteration of my 10th edition Deathwatch list? As veteran viewers well know, I used to be a huge supporter of the Spectre's kill team back in 9th edition, and I pretty much had one auto-included over the course of the entire edition. Even though it made my heart bleed, I think the loss of Omni Scramblers on the Infiltrators, as well as no combat squads, broke this kill team for the time being. Instead, I went for 5 regular infiltrators for screening, which can also take both the comms array as well as the Helix Gauntlet in a single squad of 5. I consider at least one such squad pretty much auto-include, unless they fix the Spectre's kill team at some point in the future. As my second picks, I wanted to focus on 2 shooty kill teams that would allow me to potentially double play one of our special issue ammunition stratagems for the price of one. As it currently stands, I consider both a Proteus kill team with 4 Terminators and a single Biker, the latter due to model restrictions on the Terminators, as well as an Indomitor kill team with 2 Aggressors, 2 Inceptors and 1 Eradicator the best possible combo for this. On the Proteus kill team, I went with 3 assault cannons on the Terminators and gave the 4th hammer and shield for extra tankiness, and then 4 wets can take either Infernus heavy bolters or frag cannons. I think the Infernus heavy bolters is the preferable option here. The 5th guy gets a shield. On the Indomitor, keep in mind that 2 heavy intercessors can get a heavy bolter, and the Eradicator can get the multi-melta. For the remaining datasheets, I think the bolters go best into this kind of kill team. To add them a bit of an extra punch, as well as enabling them to teleport for free, I added the Grammy's captain and equipped him with Thief of Secrets. While this might not be the most potent way to play the captain himself, I think he is well worth including for having the teleport always available, as well as both him and the 2 aggressors, allowing the kill team to punch themselves out of close combat when required. To the Proteus kill team, I added the Watchmaster, which I think is auto-include for his abilities alone. With 2 shooting kill teams already added, I wanted to add a 3rd unit with the kill team keyword, which would be melee oriented. While we could go for another Proteus kill team here, I actually think that Deathwatch veterans are immensely good value, and as such, a 10-man unit can bring 4 heavy hammers and a bunch of shields for a mere 200 points. They are also OC value 2 and get the kill team keyword. I then added the Vanilla Inquisitor, which not only gives them protection against mortal wounds, but also gives the chance to regain a CP on a 3+ when playing a stratagem on this unit. The beautiful thing here is that we can play a single strat for 1 CP on 2 kill teams and potentially get the CP back through the Inquisitor. Good stuff. I would have preferred to add the Watchmaster to this melee team and add the Inquisitor to the shooty Proteus, but the problem is that Inquisitors can only join battle line units, and even a little rules ambiguity aside, Proteus kill teams take their attaching character rules from the Vanguard veterans, which definitely do not qualify for taking Inquisitors regardless of how you want to read the rules. With the kill teams covered, and everyone talking about the power of the Desolation Marines, I did not want to skip on the opportunity to include a squad of 10 until they get nerfed. Furthermore, with vehicles getting massive improvements in 10th edition, I also felt like I needed additional anti-tank. A cheap option here would be Gladiator Lancers, but if you are like me and are kind of left with Eradicators on the shelf, these work very well in the Deathwatch still. One approach would be to pair them with the Biologi's Apothecary and deliver them with the Beacon and Chalice for a total price of 85 points, but I decided for something a bit more creative instead. Basically, I think the main weakness of Eradicators in 9th edition was that you had to get them in range and then they would easily be tagged and forever stuck in close combat until they died. As it happens, I stumbled over the reworked datasheet of the Repulsor, which can hold 6 Gravis models, and also happens to come with the hilarious new ability called Emergency Combat Embarkation, which allows a nearby unit to board the transport when getting charged. What a perfect synergy with Eradicators. I also think that for a meager price of 195 points, it has quite solid durability and firepower. With the anti-tank and party bus covered, I added a squad of Incursors, which are cheap, great for mission play, and they also come with the powerful multi-spectrum array ability, which can greatly enhance the effectiveness of our kill teams. All this left me at 1885 points, with exactly 115 more to go. What first came to mind was adding 2 more characters, a Biologi's Apothecary for the Indomitor kill team, as well as a Phobos Lieutenant for giving the Incursors shoot and fade. But ultimately, I did not want to go up to 5 characters, and something else caught my eye instead. The Calidus Assassin comes at exactly 115 points, and combined with the Watchmaster that is already in the list, it can really screw your opponent's stratagems by increasing them not only once but twice. Note that this also works on so-called free stratagems for 0 CP, as the rule that increases the cost takes precedent. Good times. Anyway, a final word on enhancements. As I mentioned back in my index review, I think that next to the Thief of Secrets, both the Beacon and Chalice, as well as the Tomb of Ectoclades are perfectly playable. As far as the tomb is concerned, I consider it a bit pricey, and it requires the character casting it to be on the battlefield during the command phase, which could turn out to be an issue if you are planning to make good use of Teleportarium, which this list is planning to do. While the Beacon and Chalice and Eradicator combo would have worked as well, I really like the idea of giving my Eradicators an extra defensive option past delivery, and I like the idea of including at least a vehicle now that they have seen massive improvements. Ultimately, I think it also depends a lot on the number of leftover points. In my opinion, 30 to 40 points of additional enhancements are not worth it if it means that you end up wasting points or have to leave out the viable unit instead. Overall, I think 3 kill teams, 3 to 4 characters, 1 to 2 enhancements, and a bunch of strong datasheets from the regular Space Marine Codex, including some mission-focused picks like Infiltrators, Incursors, or even 5 Deathwatch veterans, will result in a balanced list with a slight bias towards shooting, given our strong special issue ammunition stratagems. As a final note, we can assign leaders to units prior to the battle, as well as decide what unit boards the transport. When mirror matched against other Space Marines with Desolation Marines, we could for instance put ours into the Repulsor and deploy the Eradicators through strategic reserves instead. Always great to have options. To wrap things up, over the course of the video, we have looked at approaching Deathwatch list building in 10th edition and making best use of our Black Spear Task Force detachment. My general recommendations would be to remember to include units that can play the missions well, as unfortunately our kill teams are no longer the omnipotent ops Ganser that they used to be back in 9th edition. Having to play them as 10-man bricks for the time being, they can still be powerful assets, especially when going for shooty Proteus or Indomitor kill teams, allowing us to double play a special issue ammunition stratagem on both of them for the price of 1 CP. For a jack of all trades kind of unit, I cannot praise our Deathwatch veterans highly enough. 20 points per model, battle line, good war gear options and the kill team keyword. I think one cannot go wrong with having a bunch of these, either as a 10-man close combat brick or multiple squads of 5 for some mission play. While attaching characters to units comes with great benefits, I think that just like back in the days of SwissHammer, we have to be mindful to find the right balance between force multipliers and having enough bodies. Another major change is the general vehicle overhaul. Expect to see these showing up at least early into the edition, and given their much improved durability, I think it's mandatory to include some dedicated anti-tank option and a way to deliver that damage. This could be anything from sticking to long-range options like the Gladiator Lancer or deploying the good old Eradicators through the Beacon and Chalice or a transport. Then last and certainly not least, thanks to our strong army-wide rules, what generally works well for Space Marines is likely to work great in the Deathwatch as well. For further reference, I also provided my own example list to take some inspiration from. So that's it for my first approach to Deathwatch list building in 10th edition. With what kind of lists have you guys come up so far, and how have they worked out for you on the table? Any good combos or datasheets I have overlooked completely, or any major changes you would recommend to your fellow Deathwatch players? Let me know in the comments. Then finally, if you made it this far and I still have your attention, if you like my content, any additional support is greatly appreciated as it helps me invest into future videos. For that, I have both a Ko-fi as well as a Patreon page, links are in the description. Furthermore, I would also like to mention that there is a SwissHammer Facebook page where I will be posting links to my videos as well as articles I find of interest. I do read a lot about the hobby, but not all of it will always end up as its own video. I look forward to seeing you there as well. As always, thank you very much for watching, guys. Your continued support is greatly appreciated. I hope you have been enjoying this video. Give me a thumbs up if you did, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thanks again and see you next time.